the self-concept that we have, or some people would call it an identity, that we be caring, that we be non-attached even, that we be this or that. And this is interesting to me. And I had an insight about this, which I've also shared, so you might have to hear the story twice, which is I was teaching in Palo Alto, and there was a fellow there that some of you may know, I won't mention his name, but he was very upset about something. And it was kind of a trivial thing, but it meant a lot to him. It was not getting friended on Facebook by someone who was really important to him. He was very upset and he felt very rejected. And he kept going on, and I said, who feels rejected? And in that moment, he didn't really, I think he just kept feeling rejected. For me.
I feel rejected.
No, I started to feel rejected. It's a big mess. No. I went, oh my gosh, who is it? And I saw in that moment that we have this self-concept that we think it's rejected or is special or that we're trying to protect or elevate or decorate, and I saw that suddenly as, that doesn't even exist. There's this energy of life, we know that. The idea of a self comes and goes. The memories, the whole life story, you see the name, everything, right? The body will come and go, body always changing. There's this life energy. And we've shaped it by a thought. And when I saw that in that moment, I realized, oh, no one gets hurt. There's no real entity being damaged by this not being friended on Facebook. It's just a thought of damage, you see. It's just a thought of damage. And that really helped me not care about stuff, because I was like, oh, there's nothing there that really gets hurt. It's the identity itself is a thought creation. Now I still call myself Amy, and I still have my preferences, and I still have my personality, but to me now it's just how we dress up and play this game, because we're different, and that's beautiful that way. But to see that there's nothing that can be damaged. Gabby was speaking to this. Whatever we go through cannot be damaged. We think we're damaged. That's it. We think we're damaged. We experience the feeling of being damaged. That's why it's so simple. And that's why it's so hard for people to get.
Amy, when working I'm sure you're working in jails or working in shelters or with people who have diagnoses, and they obviously have, pretty symptomatic, and you're seeing all this. I mean, we've always said we see past that. We see the illusion of what they're presenting, right? And so we don't see their diagnosis, or we don't see their rap sheet. We see that behind all that is this perfect entity.
Yes.
Or we talk about talking to their health and not to what they present. But I think because that's so dramatic, we forget, when I look at Amy, I'm looking at the same thing. That this is not who Amy is.
Even
And
when
so-
we're outside of people, we forget.
We forget
Yes.
because it looks normal. It's the normal look that we forget, that we're still looking at something that somebody just made up.
Yes.
And we're not looking at the person.
And we're looking at something you've made
Yeah.
about
So
the person.
if Amy, the person that is made up, says something that is like, what? I forget. No, that's just still part of the mask, the costume, and I can look past that. But the closer we are to somebody, sometimes the harder it is to see that it's just the costume, the Halloween costume. If it happens to be your spouse, your partner, you're just like, what? Knock it off, as opposed to seeing it like we see more innocence, as we used to say, in somebody who's in jail. You know, the murderer who obviously has got a problem.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's not. It's all made up.
And that's
And-
part of this process that I wanted to point to that you had asked about is as helpers, when we're not able to see the innocence in the client or the student, then that becomes our journey. That becomes our, what's going on in my thinking. So the helping stops at that moment because we're reinforcing in our judgment, we're reinforcing whatever habits of thought they have. Does that make sense? So then we come back to ourselves and say, I mean, Gabby and I used to work together at Camden School, right around here somewhere. And there was one gal that Gabby could not stand.
I hated her, to be more specific. I was very frightened of her, actually. That's what happened, I was very
Right.
frightened of her.
And for whatever reason, I wasn't getting triggered. I just didn't see anything threatening about her. So Gabby would say, "You're on," in that classroom, because she would talk a lot. And so I think that's really nice too, to just, to be okay with the limits of our understanding. I'm just not understanding this. And Rob, I would say too that I know that sometimes there's a real good reason for that gut feeling, this is uncomfortable, but you always want to keep the door open too. Because I've found it's tricky with other people, because it's hard to know, is this my thought about them? Or is this like a danger situation? And it's fine to remove yourself if it's not comfortable and not going well. You know, relationships sometimes are, I mean, I was just visiting with a friend of mine who's a 3P practitioner, has been way longer than me. And after he learned the principles and was, you know, flying around, healing everyone, he had to separate, he and his wife had to separate. Because they were in this pattern, they told me, where they kept going into their habitual thinking and they weren't seeing a way out. So they separated, and that gave them the space to kind of reflect and reconnect. So anyway, it's tricky with our thinking, but I always say just keep the door open. You might think it's reality, but why not keep the door open? It's like with medication. Why not keep the door open to seeing thought more deeply? Yeah.
Anita actually really profoundly helped me when I'm case managing, and I've got these 2-year clients on site at the shelter, and there was this one gentleman, so I'm new to the principles as well as being a case manager, but he just kept giving me a bad time. I mean, there are rules, you know, and he just kept challenging and challenging. This is what I saw. Okay. And there was one point where we was standing there was all these guys behind him, and he was pretty much telling me to go F off. So I went downstairs, and Anita was managing the shelter at the time, and I went in and I said, you need to discharge him. He needs to go. Or right now, he's not doing anything he's being told. And she looked at me quite calmly and said, you want me to discharge somebody and have him be homeless because you're upset right now with him? And I'm like, yeah. And she looked at me. I couldn't have been placed in a better place than sitting next to Anita. She looked at me and she said, let him be your teacher. What? How is he going to teach me anything? He won't even behave. And she said, just let him be your teacher. And I totally got it, not right in the moment. All right, I said, okay, fine. I trusted her enough to just let myself get over myself. And I got it later. I mean, it occurred to me that what I was creating was this image of who I thought he was. He wasn't trying to harm me. He wasn't coming at me. He was just doing the best he could in the moment with whatever was occurring to him. And it was really my job to see beyond that, to see past that, because I was creating the image of what I thought was coming at me. And that was so mind-boggling opening for me. It really was. And then Linda one time very casually says to me, right after I met her, It seems to me it isn't what he's doing that bothers you, it's that it bothers you that bothers you. And I was like, get the F out of here. Seriously. And I say it all the time, I use it all the time in example, but yeah, it was, yeah, I'm doing that. I'm pretending in this moment, my experience is, he is coming at me, or he is bothering me, or he's scary. He's not scary.
I just want to do a time check because I had a request to talk about the
11:52.
Okay.
I'll have, my alarm will go off at 10 after.
Okay. So would that, would you guys like to hear a little bit about?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much. Okay, is that okay?
Yes, yes,
Maybe we can
please.
get to your question at the end. Well, you know, it really was just like any other work that I've done, although I guess the situation was one of the more extreme ones because, you know, we all think it's extreme for someone to go into a school and start shooting people up. I hope we always think that that's extreme. This school had a school shooting in 2005. It was a Native American reservation. So it was a long time ago. And the person who had been working there called me, I think in 2007, and was hoping to bring the principals in at that time. We tried to do it with the Kellogg Foundation and different sources of funding. It didn't work. And so I sort of just lost track of the whole thing because nothing ended up happening. Now I was able to reconnect with this person, and the new superintendent there, a beautiful woman, and she said that she had prayed, because she's near retirement, after her last job to be of use. She said, I have one more challenge in me, give me that challenge, and this was it. So by the time I got there, which was I guess last month, they had been having suicides. So this is galvanizing the community to try to bring people in. They're having a suicide almost every month, which we're now seeing also in Palo Alto, almost every month, and which we saw in Palo Alto about 6 years ago as well. For 2 years that was going on.
And about a week ago,
And about a week ago,
another one.
yeah. And the last one at that reservation was a 10-year-old. So I got there a day early, and I hung out with this Native American man. And we drove all around the reservation, and he was telling me about the shooting. And he was telling me something I didn't know also, which was that he was in the building when the shooting happened. And he was in a classroom at the door telling the kids to lay down on the floor while all the shooting is happening in the hallway or God knows where. He was telling me about the drug and alcohol abuse that was happening, methamphetamine, heroin, 60% of kids, fetal alcohol syndrome. You know, this isn't a big community, but it is a ravaged community. So a couple of things started to strike me, and one was that when this person was talking, he talked about students that were in the room when the shooting was happening, and how afterward they told him, when we were lying on the floor and we looked at your face, we knew we were going to be okay. So he realized that in the midst of this terror, there was great love happening at the same time. And in the ways that everyone tried to take care of each other, in the ways they tried to take care of the children, and the ways the children tried to comfort each other. So that was really beautiful. And then the other thing that happened, this was going to be 350 district employees in one room for a day, mandated. Okay. Just looking at Linda and Kathy.
This is 10 years later.
This is about 10 years later.
And he's telling you about it.
He's telling me about all this, but there's still all these issues going on in the community, including these suicides. And I'm hearing about all this, and I'm seeing the beauty of the reservation too, in the snow, and the beautiful red berries that are there, and the beautiful quiet lake, and the people who are fishing, you know, out on the lake in their little like sheds that they do, like ice fishing. So it just kept occurring to me all this beauty too, you know, and this resilience that was also in this community. And finally, after hearing a little bit more, I turned to my friend and I said, look, we can't think about all this. We can't. We need to go in there and we just need to talk principles, and we'll see what happens. You know, If we start going into all of this stuff, it's just, and this is what's been going on, is people keep thinking about all of this stuff, you know? So, so we got up and we shared the principles that day. And then I had dinner with this man and his wife who had been in the shooting and who had been through all of these suicides happening at the school. And she said, she got a lot out of the training and it was wonderful. And she said, Anne, I feel like we've never had a chance to grieve, you know? And as we're talking, I said, well, what would that look like to you? Because I think the district felt like they had done their best to try to help give teachers time off, and they just probably really didn't know how to let people grieve and help them to heal. I mean, you know, we're only human. We have, up until today, I think limited technology in terms of what we know about helping to heal people. And I said, well, what would that look like to you if the district were to allow you guys to sit down and grieve, or what would you want to see? And she said, you know what, I would just want to see more of these trainings. And that was a surprise to me, because I thought she would say, I would want to sit down and cry or talk about the kids, and she said, I would just want to have more of these trainings. So for me, I guess as a teacher, it was a little intimidating to go into this situation, especially all these mandated people. The beautiful thing about the superintendent is she had bus drivers there at the training. She had the cooks there at the training. She had the security guards at the training. And she said because when the kids get on the bus, that bus driver is the first person they see. And she was really getting it, that the school culture is everyone. And imagine when the kids get on the bus and someone's smiling at them and seeing their beauty. And then they go to the cafeteria line and someone's smiling at them and seeing their beauty as they're serving the food. Just the feeling. So with all these people and all these mandated people, and of course I had this Native American man who knew all the politics, so he was giving me like all the politics of who didn't show up and who was supposed to show up and who was on there texting on their phone the whole time. And you know, I feel like sometimes if we're teachers, we pay too much attention to what's not going well, rather than just trusting that what we're sharing is really helpful. We don't know how it will be helpful, and we can only do our best. We can only do our best. So, so I guess that was really my takeaway from it. And there were these beautiful stories that this man, this Native, I'm not naming him because when he went through the shooting, he became the shooting guy. You know, like everyone would want to talk to him about how he had been in the shooting. And I think now he's feeling more like he could maybe go out and help people, sharing his story. But I'm not sure where he's at, so I'm not saying who he is. But he had worked with people on the reservation in a very quiet, gentle way over these many years. I think it's been 7 years since he first contacted me. And he just would share about thought, or he'd run into his cousin at the grocery store, and his cousin is depressed, and so-and-so's died, and so-and-so committed suicide, and now I'm thinking about it. And he said, we spent 40 minutes in like the produce aisle. And then this guy came to the training, and I said, well, is that the guy, you know, that you talked to? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, he's got to talk about what he saw. So he talked about how he saw that he could either hold it all in his mind, or he could let it go. And that was really the story I kept hearing from the people that this person had been working with, was that people saw that it was okay to let it go. I think we have a misunderstanding around grieving, that to love a person is to grieve. I think we think love looks a certain way. But you know, people have that insight about this is not what they would want from me. You know, at a certain point they would want for me to live my life. And that's the deepest kind of love, seeing that love is always here. And it doesn't have to be wrapped in pain. It can be something totally transformative and beautiful. So I really saw, these incredible stories of people living through very difficult, one teenager who actually they're now hiring at the school because he spoke at the in the big group. I asked him to speak because he told me his story on a break. He said he had lived through having a friend die in his arms of gunshot wounds. I don't think this was even the shooting, this was just stuff happening in the community. And he had lived through the shooting, and he had lived through all these suicides of his friends. And he had lived through cancer. I mean, the kid's like maybe 17 years old. And he started drinking, he became depressed. So for many years he was just mostly drunk all the time, which is what a lot of people are doing to mask their feelings. And in a kind of depression where he couldn't hold on to a relationship or really do much of anything. And he said it was just a couple things that this other guy that I'm talking about told him. One was, happiness is a choice. He said that got in there and it stuck.
Mhm.
Like for 6 months, he didn't get it, but it was like, there's something about that. And then he ran into this guy again and he told him about the principles this time. And then he saw, oh my goodness, I could really just let this go. And when I got there, the first people in this big massive room where I'm like, oh, here we go, here we go, all mandated. I was actually kind of nervous, given the issues too that they were facing. This young man came up to me with his mother and gave me this gift of these beautiful earrings, like native made beaded earrings, and said, we're so grateful that you're here because we've been helped so much already by what you're gonna say, and we know what you're gonna say. So that has given me a lot of hope. I actually have this little dream that maybe the stories from this very impoverished community in the Midwest of Native American people might be helpful to kids in Palo Alto. I just have this kind of like dream, because you see, it doesn't matter where you live or how much money you have. We all can come under this illusion of thought. It's part of the human condition.
But how do you, going back to just a feedback on a couple of things that you said before, what Irina said, she knows that depression, again, I'm dealing with that a lot now
Yeah.
and feel pretty powerless. So people who've been doing that for a while, even they fall off the wagon once in a while, or for a long while, or whatever. And they know that it'll pass away. A lot of people, especially younger people, don't know that. And I think, I'm speculating, that probably that is Haley's problem. That when the thing like that starts, as a young person, she doesn't have a clue that it will pass away. She is probably imprisoned by that thought, that, oh my God, that panic attack. So how do we teach them that this is a temporary thing? At least so they know that whatever I'm experiencing right now will pass away, because that's a powerful feeling, that it's temporary, wait it out, just be patient, and in a couple of minutes or whatever, it would be replaced by something else.
If you don't keep feeding that thought, if you don't keep feeding that
But
thought.
they don't know that, and
Yes, so wait,
depression-
now you're a counselor.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna ask you, because you have the privilege, I know it feels overwhelming, of working with these kids, correct?
Not really.
No?
Only in academic capacity. When it comes
Oh.
to depression and coping and cutting and suicidal things, we refer them to psychologists. And I'm seeing more and more of these kids who don't have a clue that this thought would pass. And I think, am I accurate that when it happens to you, you think that, oh my God, it's just not stopping?
Well, Elena,
And I think when it doesn't stop,
Yes.
that's why depression turns into this suicidal
yes,
thing, and then we all feel overwhelmed with it, because we are not equipped to provide that. I can teach what I don't know, and
but what do you know?
About suicides,
No,
not
no,
much.
just what you just said to me. You said this will pass. How can we teach them? right?
We are trying.
Okay.
I'm trying, but I still don't think that I'm successful in that. Because they hear you, but it probably needs to be reinforced, or it probably needs to be in a fashion, and they hear and are exposed to that enough. Because even when I tell myself that whatever I'm experiencing, that will pass, a lot of thoughts of whatever nature, personal, professional, they have a toxic nature. You know that they will pass, then they're back.
Right.
So, and for these kids, just randomly, we have 30-second interaction with these kids. It's a revolving door, and I'm dealing primarily with academic stuff. So, I'm just curious how you can take that to teens so they know that.
Well, I'll tell you something interesting. I was on the task force in Palo Alto, the suicide prevention task force, the first time the suicide started. And I had my little
Years
book,
ago,
The
right?
Spark Inside, and I went to the head of the task force and I said, look, here's this book, maybe we could give this to the kids and maybe they could learn these things. And he said, well, what's it about? I said, well, it's about how we have different states of mind and how they're created by our thoughts, and if we don't take our thoughts so seriously, the states of mind will pass, and how underneath that. And he was like, wow, that's really good. He said, how could we teach this to the kids? And I'm thinking to myself, what I just said.
You just say it. Just
It's
do
not
it.
rocket science. It's not. It's very, very simple. And even if you're just blundering around with a lot of it you just don't know, that's okay. Okay, well look, this is what I know. I learned that my thoughts create my feelings, and that if I don't keep feeding the thoughts and I'm patient with myself, the thoughts will pass, and I have a deeper source of insight, I have a deeper source of thought that will bring me something helpful, or I'll just be back in a good feeling. That's just sharing in your words. There's nothing magical about this. I mean, you could say it's totally magical and wonderful, but there's no special trick. It's just you in your world, being who you are and sharing the best you can, and sometimes taking a risk. You know, taking a risk. Because when I think too much about, oh, I'm going to teach the principles to these people who are grieving, and it's heavy and it's serious, then I start talking myself out of it. And when I just stick with it, it's like, then people are in relief. They were crying tears of relief that day. And we only had one day with them. You know? So I'm going to just empower you. You're the one that's there. Maybe you have 30 seconds. You can only do the best you can. Maybe another opportunity arises where you could, you know, start linking people. I mean, you've got all these people in the room, including myself, who really want to help. Just see, wait and see. Okay, there are a lot of people with ideas.
One quick. We don't have to worry. They already know this. We're not putting anything into them. We're not having to, we're just sort of suggesting something that will awaken what they already have.
And such a relief to know. Such a relief to know. Yeah.
You know, when I think about that, you have 30 seconds, 5 minutes with someone, any one of us. If I see the innate health in them, and I know it's there, that gives a different feeling in the relationship, even if it's for a few minutes. But if I get into, oh my God, they're all, you know, then my thinking gets going, they pick up on that and they get more worried. So if I can just see their innate health, you know, and that's, just before we started this group, I got a phone call. I live in a housing cooperative and I'm on the board. And I got a call from our office manager telling me something that someone wanted to do. And one of my first thoughts is, if I say yes to this, I know a certain person who's on the board is going to give me shit, big pun. And then it's just, oh. And then you're talking and this keeps coming in. And then all of a sudden I went to that place where I saw, felt, and experienced her innate health. That she has that, and she doesn't know it. She just gets so caught up in her thinking, and her solution is to yell and scream at people, me, numerous times, at other people. She doesn't know how to do it different. She just doesn't know. And if I can stay in that place where I can see her innate health, I have a chance of being useful and helpful to the whole board, which includes her. And I can't be attached to her doing anything any different than what she's been doing. Because the moment I'm attached to her doing something different, I've moved out of seeing her innate health. In that moment, it's gone. And it'll probably happen. But to have that experience during this meeting and feel this different feeling is really nice. I like it.
Yeah. Amy, you got about 2 minutes.
Oh, gosh. So I think we'll just wrap it up. I did want to say what this kid said to me, the one who had been through all that stuff. He said to me, and this is why I said, oh, you have to get up and speak. He said, now I have a hard time being grumpy.
Oh. Grumpy.
Oh.
So anyway, these are, it's just very hopeful to me to have people like that who can share from that kind of experience of suffering. And you all have known people who've suffered quite a bit. So anyway, it's just so nice to be with you.